Netflix reported Q3 results this week, saying 2025 ad revenue will double and engagement is rising, but by how much? And is the NBA a ticket to Peacock's success or a poison pill? Listen on.
Welcome to this week's edition of Inside the Stream. This is Will Richmond from Video News, and Colin Dixon is with me here again from Endscreen Media. Colin, how are you? I see the sun is like shining right in your eyes.
It is. Yeah. I just got back from LA at the OTTX Summit, Will, and lots of discussions there. But a lot of discussions about distribution complexity and problems in that department. Lots of discussion about AI's impact on the ecosystem. Very interesting discussions there, but we're not really going to talk about any of that today. We've got sort of a couple of news stories, and then we've got a couple of stories we're going to dive a little deeper into, right?
Yeah, and you're going to lead us off with new data from Antenna. We just had Jonathan Carson on last week, and they then released some new data early this week about ESPN and Fox, the bundle.
Right, and they sort of snuck this in right after we recorded our podcast, so a bit disappointed we couldn't include it last week, but we'll include it this week. And basically what they did was, so our listeners will remember that both ESPN and Fox One launched on August 21st, and they looked at subscriptions to those products for the next 30 days, basically, or a little bit more. They looked at it for between August 21st, when they launched, and September 30th. And what they found was ESPN had 2.1 million signups and Fox had 1.1 million. And I should say that those do not include anybody that got access through their pay TV operator, which is a lot, right? Fox One, a lot of pay TV operators are allowing people to use Fox One, not so many ESPN, but it doesn't include those because Antenna looks at credit card payments and what people are actually paying for. So this is actually pretty good performance for both of them. I think probably the folks at Fox One are very, very happy with the 1.1 million performance. And ESPN, well, that's not bad, snapping up 2.1 million in the first month. The interesting thing is, Will, that they both sort of lent on bundles or different sorts of bundles to get there. ESPN really benefited from the Disney bundle. According to Antenna, 3/4 of the people that signed up through a bundle. And who wouldn't? Goodness me. There was, if you look, you can get Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN for the same price as ESPN standalone. So just $29.99. I say $29.99. So the bundle there was tremendously influential. There was a lot of people, I think, who just went, well, this is kind of a no-brainer, right? Big test there is 1 year from now when the price resets, and it will reset to $50, basically $49.97. So we'll have to see what happens in a year. The other one, Fox, well, Fox has been consistently saying Lachlan Murdoch has consistently said that he has very modest goals, as he said, and so our subscriber expectations will be modest, and we're going to price the service accordingly. It's priced pretty high, $20. But here it seems that Amazon has been incredibly influential in driving Fox One subscriptions, Will. Antenna says that 60%, 2 in 5 subscriptions came through Amazon. And we've talked on the podcast before about how powerful Amazon has been with a lot of the what we call specialty services, or what we're calling specialty services. And here it is once again rearing its head with Fox One and helping drive 60% of those 1.1 million signups.
We are not surprised, right? As you just said, we have talked about the power of Amazon in the past, and I would think that will only continue for for Fox as we go forward. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I do. There's one other thing that was not included here because it occurred after that window, and that is, of course, Fox One and ESPN are going to be available in a separate bundle. So if sports fans are really crazy, they can sign up for both of them, and the sign up saves them $10. I think it's $39.99, not $49.99, which is what it would have been if they subscribed separately. I have to say, I don't know that is going to continue to drive sign-ups at the pace that we've seen them going forward. I think there was probably a lot of people who were not signed up to pay TV, were looking for ESPN, or maybe had heard about it, and so that sort of drove sign-ups there. So I don't think that'll have a big impact going forward, and I think we'll see sign-ups slow down a lot. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what next quarter brings.
We will. But let's go on to the next short news item, no pun intended, excuse me, that YouTube has, I'm reading now quoting now from an article in The Verge, that YouTube has added into their Shorts product a new feature that allows mobile users to set a limit on how much they can scroll their Shorts feed on a daily basis. So the idea being that, as we know, people start scrolling and then they can't stop. It is something of an addiction. And so Shorts now has this way of capping. Of course, you can swipe away the notifications, so it's not like your phone shuts down or the app closes down or anything extreme like that, but it is at least a reminder to users that they've reached the limit that they've previously set. So sign of the times, Colin, what do you think?
I don't know, this just makes me smile. We humans, we just have no self-control, Will. I mean, let's be honest, when we find something we like, we just overdo it. And, it's really sad when you have to have somebody who is trying to keep you glued to it, give us a tool so that we can, we can control our usage. It's kind of sad, but there you go. I guess it's something that we need. Exactly.
Okay, well, let's get into our main stories, Colin. Netflix reported their earnings earlier this week. Of course, they now provide a whole lot less information than they used to, but there were updates on the ad side of their business that you want to speak to.
Yeah, that's right, Will. And so, as you said, they're giving much less information than they used to give. So it's actually kind of difficult to validate anything, with any real data. But I guess sort of top line is that they met revenue goals, but they had a problem with operating income because they took a charge in Brazil because Brazil decided they owed them a bunch of tax. I think they paid them $600 million in taxes that they weren't expecting, and that hurt their operating income. But I really want to focus in on two areas that have become obviously very, very, very important for them. One is engagement and the other is the ad business. So Netflix regularly talks about when they go into a new business, they talk about crawl, walk, run as their modus operandi for edging into the business. So they start real slow and then they pick up pace until they've got everything in place, and then they really let things fly. Greg Peters, who's the co-CEO, he says that they've entered the quote walk phase. They've finally passed the crawl phase, but he thinks that they're doing pretty well. He said, "We recorded our best ad sales quarter ever, and we are now on track to more than double ad revenue this year." He did not say how much that was. I think we mentioned on a previous podcast that there's this company called Seaport Research who were estimating 1.6 billion in ad revenue for this year. My rough calculations sort of support that it's something in that ballpark. So that is getting pretty good, because if you actually work that out based on the number of ad-supported viewers, what you get is that they're earning somewhere between $4 and $8 per month per standard with ads subscriber. The goal, obviously, is to make up the difference between the revenue that they're getting from people that are watching ad and ad-free, which is $10 difference. So if they're at the upper end, then they're earning about $8 per month. So that's probably good that they're getting more towards where they need to be to equalize the revenue. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which is also incredibly influential to the first thing, which is ad revenue, which is engagement growth. And last quarter in Q2 2025, Greg Peters tacitly acknowledged that the per member engagement wasn't growing. Well, he was a lot more bullish in Q3, the Q3 earnings call. He actually said, yes, total view hours grew a bit faster in Q3 2025 than in the first half of 2025. In fact, in Q3, we achieved our highest ever quarterly view share in the US at 8.6%. Which is based on Nielsen's The Gauge data. And he says it's 9.4% in the UK, and that's according to Barb data. The problem is, of course, that now that they're not telling us subscribers, we can't actually work out how much that is on a per viewer, a per subscriber basis or per member basis. But it does seem like that they're growing engagement, and they are really they're really looking to continue to do that by expanding the amount of content that they're providing to consumers. And that's something that both Ted Sarandis and Greg Peters in the Q3 call talked about. And of course, there are two real ways they're doing that. And I think we mentioned this in the podcast last week, was the Spotify deal where they're bringing in video podcasts on an exclusive basis. They called it co-exclusive agreement with Spotify in the call. But they're also doing other things to sort of boost that engagement. And one of the ways is that they're beginning to add interactivity in two ways. One is they're adding it in ads. So they're introducing interactive ads later this month, they said. Later this quarter, which I guess is Q4. And they're also looking to leverage interactivity more broadly. And by that, he said, how does interactivity become complementary to linear storytelling? And so they're looking at ways at really drawing people in with interactivity. Of course, they did that big time with Black Mirror Bandersnatch back in 2019. I don't think they're looking at doing anything like that. But what they are looking to do is to introduce things like polling, and he says we're currently testing it in Dinner Time Live with David Chang with real-time voting and stuff like that. So they're really looking to push that engagement figure. The fact that they're doing this well still suggests to me that they're not seeing much growth on a per subscriber basis. Because when he says, we're doing much better with engagement, it could be because they're just continuing to grow subscribers. So anyway, those are some things that they're looking to do to continue to boost growth, keep people engaged, keep people coming in on a daily basis and watching. So things continue to go in the right direction, I think, for Netflix.
Exactly. Netflix chugs along. And just picking up on your comments, Colin, about the role that that the ad-supported revenue is now starting to play for the company's overall picture. I have to say, from my perspective, and I know Antenna tracks this, but I don't think we've seen the data recently, how significant a percentage of Netflix's new subscribers are on the ad tier. I would think that at this stage, the majority, if not the vast majority, of new subscribers are on the ad tier. That's what the Antenna had sort of hinted to that, I think, the last time we talked about it, which has been some months ago. But of course, Netflix doesn't reveal the number of subscribers that it has any longer. But I think that's really what's helped Netflix continued to grow here. And also, of course, as you mentioned, engagement is critical to an ad-supported product.
Yep.
So to the extent that they're driving up engagement, they're making that ad-supported tier ever more valuable. So I think, what does all that net to? I think it nets to the idea that whereas just not that long ago, Netflix was saying they didn't even want to do an ad-supported tier, that they wanted to be completely ad-free. Now, just a few years later, the company's really, in some ways, their future success hinges on the value of the ad-supported tier.
Yeah, it really does, Will. And, but this, I was really struck when I was listening to that Netflix call. I usually listen into the Disney call and the Netflix call. There's a couple I usually listen into. I was really struck at the difference in tone between how Netflix talks about its customers and how Disney does. And this is a little bit unfair, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I think it's very typical. The most notable difference, I think, between Netflix and Disney is that Netflix talks about members. They don't talk about subscribers. They don't talk about consumers. They don't talk about, customers. They talk about members. Here's a great quote from Greg Peters. It's really about having a steady drumbeat of shows and films that our members love. He was talking about this driving the engagement in the last call. And here's another quote from Disney's call, right? This is Bob Iger. He's been Disney's on and off CEO for quite a while. This is what he said. That said, what we've already been doing and what we'll continue to do is give consumers of Disney Plus and Hulu a taste of live sports on that service so that we have an opportunity to upsell them on the Disney D2C service, which obviously is a priority of ours. You never hear Netflix say anything like that about their members. Disney's really thinking about people as ATMs. This really sounds like they're thinking about them as ATMs, Will. They don't talk about the people in their parks like this. I don't know why they think they talk about people in the D2C services like that. And it's a bit unfair because I'm pulling those quotes. But really, this is, if you listen to Disney's calls and Netflix's calls, that is a very typical statement from both, I think.
Well, your point is well taken, although a cynic's point of view might be that the Netflix team has better media training than the Disney team. But nonetheless, we have been hearing for many years Netflix use the member, quote-unquote, member vocabulary. They never talk about their members as customers or consumers. So for sure, that's to their credit. Yeah. And, right down to they don't talk about average revenue per customer. They talk about ARM, average revenue per member. I think, you can be cynical about it, but this is stuff that comes from the top, right? And I have a feeling that this is the sort of tone that they set for the entire organization. But anyway, that's probably enough about them. We want to talk also about NBA and NBCU, right? Yeah, we only have a little time left here in today's podcast, but we did want to observe that the NBA season is now underway. And that means that new deals that were announced last summer are now being executed on. And one of those is that NBC is now a player, no pun intended, in the NBA broadcast lineup. And that deal was reportedly for $2.5 billion a year, $27 billion over 11 years. And Colin, there's been a lot written about this deal, and we saw some new articles this week as to whether this deal can really pay off for NBC and Peacock. And I think those questions really still remain. They're paying this $2.5 billion a year for about 100 regular season games plus some playoff games. Peacock, according to the last Nielsen The Gauge data, had about a 1.4% share of viewing. So still pretty low down there relative to the other big players in the streaming industry. So the question really is, how many new subscribers can they add with the NBA during the NBA season? And then importantly, how many of them will stay on Peacock once the season ends next spring? And this is something that Jonathan Carson from Antenna was talking with us about last week related to their new subscriber views product, and showing that these individual sports events don't have great, at least to date anyway, don't have great success in converting for longer term subscribers. So I think that's really the challenge for Peacock and NBC is they're laying out huge money, $2.5 billion a year, and it really remains to be seen whether they bump that number, their percentage share of viewing, as we see in the Nielsen data, and also their ongoing subscriber count, not just temporary blips up as a result of people wanting to watch games, spin out, maybe watch for the season, then spin out. Those are the key questions, I think, for NBC and Peacock to see whether this deal is actually profitable over the full 10 years of its life. And I think that's still very much an unknown. Don't you agree?
Oh, I totally agree with this. When they first announced this deal, and this was earlier this year, one of the things they did was they pretty much almost immediately announced an increase in price of $3. I think you mentioned that. $3 monthly price increase that was effective back in August or maybe even in July. And covering this 2.5 billion nut is going to be really hard. $3 increase for, I think they have 41 million subscribers today. That nets them about 400 million in additional revenue annually. That doesn't even come close to covering that 2.5 billion nut. You'll note they relaunched the NBC Sports Network. I think they did this primarily because they're just scrambling. They've got their fingers down the back of the sofa looking for every quarter, nickel and dime that they can generate from this to cover that enormous nut. And look, one of the things they said in the last call was that they were going to allocate quite a lot of the costs of the NBA to Peacock because, of course, it's going to be a showcase sport on the service. Well, Peacock was on a pretty good path towards profitability. If you look at the last few quarters of Peacock's loss, Peacock made in Q4 2024, it was $372 million in the hole. The next quarter, 214. The next quarter, Q2 2025, 101 million. So I think that they would probably, without the NBA, have crossed that barrier into profitability in Q3 2025. They are not going to be anywhere near it now. I'm really looking forward to Comcast numbers to see how deep a hole NBA has put Peacock in towards profitability, if they tell us that is. This is, like that Wall Street article that you mentioned, Will. This really has me wondering if they're going to get there. This is an enormous amount of money that they have to cover.
Well, to your point, when you mentioned the Comcast earnings, my guess is that we will not see a breakout of how much of the $2.5 billion a year in the NBA deal is being allocated directly to Peacock. I don't think we'll see that allocation. I think that'll be part of NBC, so we'll probably never know. But on the point about Peacock becoming more profitable, you're absolutely right. Those losses have steadily decreased, although I think we talked some time ago that since the launch of Peacock, I think the cumulative losses were somewhere in like the $8 billion range. So as you say, now start adding in these upcoming quarterly losses related to the NBA. And, one does have to ask the question, as an overall entity since its launch, when will this company cumulatively be profitable for Comcast? And as you just said, I don't think anybody can really say, but it's certainly as far out as the eye can see.
Yeah. Interestingly, they're going to be announcing their Q3 results next Thursday, Will. So I don't know if we get a chance, if we will get a chance to look at that, but we'll definitely come back to our audience and let them know what that looks like in a podcast in the very near future to see how much they do allocate. But as you say, this is going to be a real trial for this service because they really need to get profitable. They really need to boost the engagement. They said that NBA gave them something which they really needed, which is they needed 365 sports. They needed major sports franchises, which they think carry a sports fan through the whole year, that make Peacock an essential service for them to have for the whole year. Well, maybe closing that gap during the winter quarter with NBA was the right thing to do from that perspective. Just they really need to attract a bunch of subscribers in order to cover this, I think. So I guess we'll see if they are successful this quarter.
Yeah, and we'll see also as the months pass from the Nielsen, the gauge data, whether
if it goes up.
Yeah, whether they bump up from the 1.4%, because that should start happening pretty immediately, right?
Pretty much,
in the Nielsen data now that the NBA season is underway. So,
yep.
We'll keep an eye, as always. I think that's what we have for this week, right?
That's it.
Okay, Colin, good chatting. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and we'll see you all again next week.
Inside the Stream is a production of In-Screen Media and Video News, all rights reserved.